came in like a wrecking ball, but it may go out with a little bit of a whimper. Why's that out? Well, look, one of those speakers, 5-minute tuning, you get it, you turn it on, you're, ooh, that's not bad, is it? Then you spend some time with it, you get to know the things that are not so great, you go through all your normal music, your normal genres. It's kind of where we are with the Motion Boom Plus. I think we can all agree it's a little bit too punchy in default mode. It's a little bit harsh on the ears. Now, what I noticed when I got this early, so do you work for Soundcore? No, I do not work for Soundcore. And me, amongst about 6 million other reviewers, it seems, got an early release of the Soundcore Motion Boom Plus. And that meant we was on early firmwares. I can't tell you what firmware it was because when we finally got app support, and I didn't have app support in my first video, that's why I couldn't do EQ. And when you first go in, for us, when we first went into the app, you were forced to update. You couldn't even see what firmware you were on before you updated with the newest firmware, which is 0.29. And what I did notice, having measured before and after anyway, added what we don't need, a 6 kilohertz peak. It was already teetering on sibilant. What's that sibilant, Al? Well, it's with sort of sound. 4 to 8 kilohertz, that sort of region. But 6 kilohertz is slam dunk. No matter where you say that region is approximate, is right in the middle of that region. And what did they go and do? It was already a bit harsh. They stuck a big 6 kilohertz peak there. Oh, why did they do that, Al? Got no idea. So I don't work for Soundcore. This is the first time Soundcore have ever contacted me. When I first realised there was no app support, I emailed them back to the person who had offered me the speaker. So there's no app support. And do you know what they said? Absolutely nothing. Couldn't be bothered to reply. They did their job. They were getting the speakers out early. Were they trying to get the... Because this is not the Soundcore we've known before. Were they trying to overhype it before you heard it? Deliberately, did they know something? I know a lot of people, including me, when you first turn it on, that was quite impressive because it's a bigger bass slam than we're normally used to, but it wasn't deep. It's more mid and upper bass heavy. But it was fun. It was that party tuning. It's certainly not hi-fi, party tuning. So the question was, it's Soundcore. The thing about Soundcore is really great, usable, multi-slider graphic equalizer. Still not a complete graphic equalizer. It says plus 6 decibels, minus 6 decibels. It doesn't really relate in the real world to exactly, you're going plus 1, plus 2 decibels. But it does generally do what it promises. But we needed EQ, especially after the firmware update, which I got on my speaker, because it's definitely harsh in ears, definitely tiring for a long listen. But hey, got a hell of a thump. And in the price bracket at the moment, around £180, $190 sort of thing, you reckon this to settle probably around 150, maybe even under 150 when they've got over the hype stage and saying, oh, and here's a discount. It seems like there's always going to be a discount. They said to me, would you like a discount code for your subscribers? I said yes. Do you know what they said? Absolutely nothing at all. As I say, again, second email they did not reply to. They're probably overwhelmed, but there's nothing special about me. I do not work for Soundcore. So the thing is, you want to know is, can you turn this speaker into the magical Soundcore Motion Boom, which became magical with custom EQ? Not magical because it's the greatest speaker you've ever heard, but at the £75-ish, $75 mark after custom EQ, the amount of bass you get, really still nothing like it. What about the Mifa Wildbox? Yes, just different tuning. But for me, got on the warm side where I really, really like it. Similar tuning, even deeper bass on the Mifa Wildbox, and by the way, there's a firmware update for that you may want to find out. Apparently they've improved it, but for me, there's nothing else still at that price. And you think it's the Motion Boom Plus, it's exactly the same speaker, but with tweeters and it's going to sound, no, doesn't sound the same. It's very, very different. Lean, mean, aggressive, in your face, deep bass, warm bass, rounded bass, and quite balanced. You can EQ it to be quite balanced, although the highs, there's no tweeters, not quite, you always sound a bit off. Got tweeters, yet still sounds harsh. How can that be possible, Al? Well, there's more to having a multi-driver speaker than simply adding a tweeter. Do you know what? They charge different amounts of money for a tweeter depending on the quality. If you go for cheap, if you just want to have in the specs tweeters, you can have the cheapest tweeters, the worst for crossover. Crossover is really, really important. I know that you got a lot of people talk about the dispersion, and of course, that's when your beaming, your directivity comes into play, and then you get your cutouts on the front like you often do on the baffle, just to direct the sound, just to get it to gel. And obviously there's none of that really going on in these type of speakers. Just have a cheap tweeter, it can sound quite nasty. I kind of think that's where we are, but I digress. I've gone on and on and on, and I've told you absolutely nothing about this video. Oh. So this video is going to be, why have you got two motion booms on the table, Al? It's because I'm going to compare it with two motion booms. I think this is the first question, first major question. Well, maybe the second one. The first one is, can you improve it with EQ? You can certainly improve it with EQ, but does it become magical? We're going to find out, and then we're going to compare it with an EQ'd, because in my first video, we only did default modes because you couldn't EQ it because there was no app support. So EQ'd, and then against two of them, and we'll really see where we are now with EQ. So my first comparison will be 65% default mode versus the Alan Ross EQ mode. Can't hold it in this time, got no filter, I got no filter, 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 no filter, I got no filter. Hey man, can I get a favor? Yeah, sure, I know, see you later. Sometimes I just wanna be a hater. Gotta wash down the top 40s with the chaser. Your voice starts feeling like a waiter. Scraping my mind against a cheese grater. Before you go, sir, you have to sign a waiver. That's alright, I'm aware of the danger. You wanna get away, you better get in line. Won't go another day of wasting any time. I've got a lot to say, can't hold it in this time. Got no filter, I got no filter, 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 no filter, I got no filter.
Default versus custom. Well, my custom EQ. I've taken a fraction off that upper bass. I've added mid bass, fraction of deeper bass, but basically that's mid bass. We've filled in the recessed mids, and we've tamed some of the highs. I find the highs harsh, and that's deliberate. Particular problem here is the 6 kHz peak. It's a real peak they seem to have put in with the first firmware update, and to my ears, just nasty.
This is not one of the easy speakers in terms of tuning, because you've only got certain graphic equalizers, and they really are, just on that band where they say they are. Got a 6 kHz peak. I'm just trying to find my graph for default, which is here. So that 6 kHz peak, there's no slider there. So you've got 5 and 9. If you want to play around reducing that 6 kHz peak, you're affecting everything else outside of it. It's not easy to EQ. So if I EQ this to sort of flat, sounds really boring. It doesn't sound good at all. You've got to make it come alive. That means you've really got to work the bass. This speaker is all about the bass and then trying to balance some of the highs. The other thing was big cutout in the mids. It's not because the drivers are not up to it. If you actually go into the app and have a look at where they show their so-called frequency response graph of that signature default tuning, they've actually got a cutout in the mids. They've deliberately dipped, pulled it down. Why? I don't know. It's a good question. And maybe it's because they're trying to emphasize that bass. The speaker is all about bass, but it was in default mode, over punchy, over thin, sounds weird. It's hard to believe somebody, a few people, a load of them around a table, 500 people around a table sat down and said, yeah, cool, that sounds good. Or they could have said, look, we ain't got any time to tune it, but what we'll do is we'll send out a few to some reviewers, and we'll get them, and we'll say, oh, if you pay us £1 now, you'll get a discount off. And then, of course, once you've got your discount code, you've already paid for it, you're going to get the speaker. They've hyped it. This is not what we've known from Soundcore. So, I wonder what's going on there. However, you can improve it with default EQ. Do you know why? Because I've just done it. So, I've tamed the highs. You may not like it. That's the problem is, if you go for clarity, it's going to sound harsh. I've tried to get the overall balance to my ears. Well, trying to keep it as flat as possible, but that's not possible. And you have to push that bass. There isn't deep bass on this. You've got a decent wallop in the mid and the upper bass, but you don't have deep bass. You can hear that no matter what you do. It's not going to sound deep. What is that? That sounds fuller and deeper in the bass, to be honest. We'll get onto that in a minute. So we've got a fuller sound because we've pushed the mids. It's not quite as harsh because we've tamed some of those highs, and we have pushed the bass because the speaker's all about the bass. And so what's the point of having it if you're not going to push the bass? So I think I've demonstrated, if you like my EQ or not, doesn't come into it, you can certainly improve it. And the reason you can improve it is because the default tuning is awful. Awful. I don't know. Have they done it at Liberty? So whatever you do in the custom EQ, it's going to sound better. And you go, oh, great old Soundcore. You see what you can do when you've got EQ? So what we're going to do now we've got that EQ'd. We already had the Motion Boom EQ'd. Let's have a listen, one-on-one, for me, about as good as I can get without spending 3 years of my life on it.
Put the cigars and wear the shiny shoes. Now it's my turn to show them that I wanted to know. That I wanted to know. Where does my time even go? Where does my life go? My life go. If you take it away, where will I go? Today I walked out the door and breathed the lovely fumes. I made some coffee and started singing happy blues. Yeah. I see them smoke the cigars and wear their shiny shoes. Now it's my turn to show them that I wanted to. Do what they won't do. What I won't do. What they want me to. What they want me. I wanna ask them, well, what have I got to lose? I wanna save the whole world and that's my excuse.
Single Motion Boom, Single Motion Boom Plus, both of them in custom mode. The difference is you've got more bass on the Motion Boom Plus that you cannot EQ into the Motion Boom. But the rest of the frequency response is much smoother. There's less of these dips and peaks that you're getting on the Motion Boom Plus. The nature of the graphic equalizer means you cannot EQ them smooth, and I can EQ more of a boost in the highs on the Motion Boom because it's not as harsh as it is, even though we've got tweeters, and maybe because of the tweeters, on the Motion Boom Plus.
You buy this speaker because you'll get a level of bass you simply can't get in the Boom, and yet it still looks like the Motion Boom, but bigger. As I said, it's the Motion Boom on steroids, although the sound signature is different because one's on the leaner, thinner side, the other's a thicker, fuller, warmer sound, which I personally really, really like. So, 2 decibels more bass overall, 5 decibels in terms of the deeper bass. That's the advantage to the Motion Boom Plus. What you can't do, you can't tune the highs. This is certainly not perfect, and it's also a bit hard to get the highs right because they don't sound right to your ears, but what they don't do is sound harsh. That sounds harsh. If you may well have a high tolerance for the harshness, for the sibilance, and want a bit more clarity, and that's fine, then you'll tune it a bit more in the highs. For me, you mess around, if you go any further in the highs, so, once you start going to the brighter tracks, depends on obviously what kind of tracks you're listening to, but if you're listening to multi-genres, you're going to come across quite very bright tracks, and it's going to be awful on the ears, to be honest. The other thing, it sounds bigger, it sounds more open, and do you know why? It's because it's bigger. It is more open. It's got wide tweeters, so it's going to sound bigger. If it's one-on-one, it's going to come down to your taste. There's something to say for each of them, But overall, I can see you saying, well, I'd rather have the Boom Plus because at the end of the day, you'll get more of a wallop. But if you want more of a delicate listen, I would still go for the Motion Boom. Certainly if you're having a close-up and you're in a small room, for me, it still works. So it's hard to say, is that a better speaker one-on-one? It's a different speaker. It does some things better and some things not as quite as well. There are a lot of issues in its frequency response. So it can't match a single Motion Boom. Well, I can. I've just spent about 10 minutes telling you why it can match it, and then I said it can't. Absolutely, it can. Just in they have different things going for them. But the question is, I'm getting this a lot. Al, I said, what? I said, Al, I've got 2 Motion Booms. Should I sell them and get the Motion Boom? No, do not sell your 2 Motion Booms Plus. That would make no sense. But just how close can they get? Can 2 Motion Booms get to a single Motion Boom Plus? Let's have a listen.
Hop up in the window. Yeah. You get my vibe, no, there's no way. I'm flying high above all your gravity, trying to bring me down, but I'll never stay. Hey, hey, watch me levitate. You get my vibe, no, there's no way. You can say what you want, call me insane, trying to bring me down, but I'll never stay. Hey, hey, watch me levitate. Watch me levitate. Hey, hey, watch me levitate. In the window. In the window. In the window. In the window.
Watch me levitate, watch me levitate, watch me levitate, watch me levitate, levitate. Watch me levitate, watch me levitate, watch me levitate, watch me levitate.
Watch me levitate. You get my vibe, no, there's no way. I'm flying high above all your gravity, trying to bring me down, but I'll never stay. Hey, hey, watch me levitate. You get my vibe, no, there's no way. You can say what you want, call me insane, trying to bring me down, but I'll never stay. Hey, hey, watch me levitate. Watch me levitate. Hey, watch me levitate.
So 2 Motion Booms, it's a match for a single Motion Boom Plus. There's almost nothing in it now in terms of that bass, but the slight advantage is to the Motion Boom Plus. We've got better mids on the Motion Boom, but we've also got a smoother response throughout the frequency range. And no matter how you EQ it, if you're just using the app, you cannot smooth out the lumps and bumps of the Motion Boom Plus. Whatever you do, it's going to sound a bit off. I mentioned before, I can EQ more in terms of the highs on the Motion Boom itself, but you can't do that without introducing issues on the Motion Boom Plus.
Aha! Now, do you see why I said do not sell your 2 Motion Booms to get a speaker you've never even heard of yet? Because there's actually very little in the bass. It does go about a decibel deeper in the bass, but there's not a lot overall. And you've got a huge, huge advantage overall in terms of the immersion factor. It's so much nicer on the ear holes. Having 2 separated Motion Booms that sound almost the same bass, that sounds pleasant on the ears. I'm not listening for what's wrong, I'm listening for what's right, which is not quite what's happening with the Motion Boom Plus. So the mids, the highs, the bass, there isn't much in it, but it's a smoother mids and highs against a wavy mids, resonant, as I think you would say. It's just wrong. So overall mids about the same, overall highs about the same, but that's not the whole story. For me personally, if it's a question of 2 Motion Boom Plus, 2 Motion Booms or a single Motion Boom Plus, it's 2 Motion Booms. There's no comparison. You've got the slight hassle of carrying 2 speakers and having to pair up 2 speakers, but they sync nicely. TWS works really nicely. They're permanently locked. It's fuss-free, really. So if it's simply 2, you've got 2, should you get a Motion Boom Plus? No. That would make no sense at all. Unless, of course, it goes massively loud or it holds massively more bass at maximum volume. Does it, Al? I don't know. Let's have a listen.
It's your sexuality, you're sending out causing disruption. The police can't even stop
it. If they try, we gotta jump in. Now I hope you do not mind me watching from behind. It's you I like, it's you I like. Now Jason, one more time. This is party like Jason Flores in the building, and they keep on moving to the rhythm we love. On every woman with the girls you show. Yeah, look at hers, look at hers. Ow! That's got me doing crazy things. It's your that's got me up here in the ceiling. It's your I'm throwing cash like it's nothing. It's your I wish that I could go and touch it. It's your that's got me doing crazy things. It's your that's got me up here in the ceiling. It's your I'm throwing cash like it's nothing. It's your I wish that I could go and touch it. It's your that's got me doing crazy things. It's your that's got me up here in the ceiling. It's your I'm throwing cash like it's nothing. It's your I wish that I could go and touch it. It's your
Two motion booms simply go significantly louder than the Motion Boom Plus. Even in terms of the mid bass, there's an advantage to the Motion Boom, and in the upper bass, it's neck and neck. But from 150 Hz on, it's all Motion Boom, and it's just smoother, and that's really the difference now between the two speakers. Overlay the original track, you can see the original track is quite smooth, but on the Motion Boom Plus, it's like a tidal wave. It's down, it's up, it's down, it's up. Two Motion Booms in custom, far smoother. You have to say, it's a clear win for two Motion Booms.
OMG for the Eros. Oh my God, because that don't sound good. Maximum volume. I already said, try to get over. It's all about the bass. You need the bass to balance the harshness of the highs. Look, it's not so harsh that you can't listen to it. I'm just saying, overall, the overall sound signature is on the harsher or more sibilant side. When you lose that bass, as you do, as you go up past 8%, and by the time you hit maximum volume, it's harsh. It's not just that it's losing a bass. It's even more wavy than it was at lower volumes. It sounds, look, it goes loud. And I'm surprised, some of the speakers, I'm always surprised that people like them. I know speakers, to me, are awful. You couldn't possibly listen. But people come on and tell me they love them. Oh, that's fine. So, got to remember, there's still going to be people that say, probably the W King crowd, that sounds good to me. I was in the playground and everybody could hear it. And all the teachers are telling me turn it down. And that's probably job done for you. But for me, oh no, I can't do that. Not when I've got two Motion Booms that will hold on to more bass, that will go a lot, not a little louder, a lot louder. 3 decibels louder is double the power. So what's going on? Well, two speakers is like doubling the power, double the surface area, it's like doubling the power. We're saying 30 watts mean nothing. I hope I've got that over. I hope you've watched videos before and said, stop. By the way, I probably might or may not do another video about the boombox and my back and forth with JBL about why they're saying 160 watts. Not just pretending 40 watts plus 40 watts, or 2 times 40 watts per time, and leaving you to add them up, even though they're not saying that, and saying, you go on the US website, it says 160 watts. I've had it. Now they've told me point blank, it's 80 watts. And do you know what they said? They don't even know why. They've written it down because the support guy said he doesn't even know why they're doing that. 80 watts. But anyway, I digress. As usual, why did I say that? I was talking about watts or something. Yeah. So the equivalent watts, if that two Motion Booms, if it was a single speaker and they're saying it's 30 watts, that would be 120 watts. They're saying 80 watts. I know I'm not really taking it in, but I'm just saying on the face of it, that's 80 watts. And they are like a single speaker at 120 watts. That's why it's going a lot louder. 3 decibels louder. Not overall and indeed in peak. Total bass is about 1.5 decibels louder. It's 3 decibels up at 50 hertz. It's just, well, you heard it. I hope you heard it. I hope you didn't skip all that. That would be make it a bit pointless even doing the video, isn't it? But yeah, so it's louder, sounds better, it's smoother on the ears, and that's an ouch fist. Do I need to do the specs? I've already done the specs in the first video against the Motion Boom. So you should know, as I just said, the big differences will be 80 watts versus 30 watts, warm sound signature versus lean, mean, slightly harsh sound signature. Of course, about 75 quid. They're doing all these deals and stuff. You don't really know. I would say about 75 quid you should expect to pay. Eventually about 150 quid, but at the moment they're saying about $180, 190 quid. That don't really make a lot of sense. I think that's going to come down pretty sharpish when they hear all the things that people are saying about it at the moment. Of course, we've got a bigger battery at 46 watt hours, but it's not that far behind at 37 watt hours. On that, you'd say that was a little bit underspec for the battery. 5.3 Bluetooth versus Bluetooth 5. Can only do stereo pairing with the same model, but that can do both stereo pairing with the same model, but also can up to 100 plus speakers with other party car speakers. Do have an auxiliary in, that's a big deal for a lot of you. Some of you still DJing apparently with speakers like that. Got an auxiliary in, you don't have an auxiliary in on the Boom. 2.4 kilos. That's actually light for that big speaker, but still 2.4 kilos versus 1.5 kilos. So it's a lot heavier, but it's not heavy. Looking at it, it's a lot lighter than you expect. They both float, both IPX7, but that's IP67, so that's dust proof, but that isn't dust. The Boom is not dust proof. Got bigger woofers at 90 millimeters versus 65 millimeters. No tweeters, obviously. They've got tweeters on there. They both got titanium drivers. The Motion Boom Plus has very good latency, 33 milliseconds via Bluetooth and 17 milliseconds via auxiliary, compared to no auxiliary input anyway, and 170 milliseconds is unusable, in my experience, for, say, streaming YouTube, for example. Both use the same app, Soundcore app. I mean, you've got EQ in that app, which you're going to have to use quite literally for both speakers to get the best out of them. This has been the Alan Ross EQ video you was asking for, and of course you was also asking for 2 Motion Booms. It keeps coming up, I'm surprised. Even before you've heard it, you're thinking about selling your booms to get the Plus. That makes no sense, and now you know for sure. Oh, that makes no sense. Hope you enjoyed this video, and I thank you for watching.
I ain't about that life. I ain't about that life. Ain't no project wife, got my logic right, cause I'm not your type. I ain't about that life. I ain't about that life. Sorry, ma, I ain't get it right. I'ma just live my life. I ain't about that. I ain't about that life.